It's a warm, humid morning on Yavin 4, 12 ABY. Luke Skywalker's Jedi Praxium in the distance. New students Kip Duran and Dorsk 81 trek through the lush undergrowth. From the brush, a hairy woolamander moves in the trees above the two, startling Dorsk 81. "I was not bred for this," said Dorsk. "You weren't bred for anything but bureaucracy and comfort. I don't understand how the planet Com could have survived unchanged for 1,000 years, or why your people wanted it to." Dorsk 81 took no offense to this. "Our society and our genetics reached their perfection a millennium ago. To prevent undesirable changes, we froze our culture at that level. We took our perfect race and cloned them rather than risking genetic anomalies. I am the 81st clone of Dorsk. 80 generations before me have been identical, doing the same jobs with the same level of skill, maintaining our level of perfection and not slipping back." Dorsk looked down, frowning. "But I was a failure. I was different." "You have the potential to become a Jedi Knight. How can you consider that a failure?" "It is unsettling to be different." Star Wars gave us our first on-screen look at clones and cloning in the aptly named Attack of the Clones, released in 2002, 25 years after it was first mentioned in the original Star Wars in 1977. But between the releases of the original and prequel trilogies, something very special was born. At this time, the Star Wars Expanded Universe was an interconnected series of books, comics, and otherwise surrounding the original Star Wars trilogy, as, before the prequels, due to a Lucas decree, widely exploring before the films was not allowed. These books and comics, though mostly books, loved to dive into things that were mentioned in the films, sometimes very heavily. And sometimes too heavily, as there is a semi-frequent complaint about this era of Star Wars that has to do with the excessive "remember this from the movies" moments. Unfortunately, this isn't something that the saga has completely moved beyond either, so this is just me letting you know that a lot of what people consider to be modern issues with Star Wars have actually been around since at least 1991. That was when Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy began, kicking off the exploration into the time period beyond Episode 6, the New Republic era. During this time, Luke Skywalker began a new Jedi Order headquartered on the jungle moon of Yavin 4, another wonderful example of what I just talked about, as Yavin 4 was a world featured in the original film, so of course it had to be in the EU too. Something else featured significantly here, from dialogue in the original film, is the Clone Wars. Of course, now we know so much about the Clone Wars. It's depicted in 2, kinda 3 films. There are 2 animated series, countless books and comics, and fans are still begging for more in the modern era. But before we knew any of this, different authors extrapolated different things from the mention of the Clone Wars in the original film.
"You fought in the Clone Wars?"
The Star Wars Expanded Universe channel, Corey's Datapad, has an absolutely incredible video about the differences between these extrapolations and what we actually saw in the prequels and related media, so I highly recommend you checking that out for a fantastic deep dive into the topic and what we thought the Clone Wars were before the Clone Wars. But what I'm focusing on today is the planet Com, developed by Kevin J. Anderson, well known for his work in Star Wars, but also his work in the newer Dune novels. Anderson penned the Jedi Academy trilogy, the books following the Thrawn trilogy and the Dark Empire comics, which, as the title suggests, chronicle Luke Skywalker's efforts to restart the Jedi Order at the aforementioned Yavin 4 Praxium. Within his first class of students are a whole bunch of interesting characters that are far flung from what we consider Jedi to look like in the modern age, or at least post-prequels. Streen, the gas prospector from Bespin who could use the Force to control weather. Kirana T, the Dathomirian witch before they were changed for the Clone Wars, and the near-human Jedi historian Tian, who often communicated that history in song. But the specific student we're talking about today is Dorsk 81. 81 is part of his name, and the dialogue scene at the beginning of this video, taken directly from Anderson's Dark Apprentice, describes why. 1,000 years ago, the planet Com was regarded by its self-confident, isolationist denizens as perfect in every way. Perfect enough that their society no longer saw reproduction as valuable, making gender useless and halting things in time. Simply cloning every single citizen of the planet to do their job forever and ever, named after their predecessors only with an ascending number. By the time of Dorsk 81, there have been 80 generations of Dorsks preceding him on Com. This is an incredibly dystopian concept that has absolutely fascinated me since I first read about it, and struck me as feeling so in line with the core messages of Star Wars, while also dipping into the dystopian science fiction that George Lucas seemed to be tapping into with his first film, THX 1138. Dorsk 81 was aberrant to his uniformed society, and it manifested in his main insecurity. He was different somehow. He was sensitive to the Force. This affected him greatly until he decided to seek out Luke Skywalker after hearing news of Skywalker starting the new Jedi Order. Dorsk was assigned to be student partners with Kip Duran, another young man who was inclined towards the dark side due to manipulation of the Sith Spectre of long-dead Exar Kun. After Exar's manipulation had ended, and Kip had destroyed an entire fully populated planet, though we won't get into that, the two continued to grow their friendship, though this is completely off-screen development. During this time, Dorsk 81 becomes more comfortable with being different, not seeing himself as an outcast, but as a valued member of the Jedi Order, whose differences are a strength for not only himself, but the Order as a whole. Soon after, in the novel Darksaber, also by Anderson, and no, it's not about the Darksaber from the Clone Wars and the Mandalorian, it's a different Darksaber, Dorsk and Kip are knighted, and sent out into the New Republic to be Jedi in a way that's very different from what the Order is like during the prequels. Dorsk wishes to return to his home planet of Kham to reawaken them to the good that often comes with change. They set out for Kham, which is in the core worlds, as guardians of the New Republic, and there they visit Dorsk's family, or as he calls them, his duplicates. The city is gorgeous and strictly organized, and the two are greeted by a crowd of Khamites, who are fascinated by the fact that Dorsk is different. At Dorsk 81's home, he reunites with Dorsk 80 and Dorsk 82, who are happy to see him, but expect him to completely rejoin the workforce in the cloning facility. When he explains that he wants to be the planet's Jedi protector instead, they sternly deny him this, shunning him until he and Kip leave to fight the Imperial Remnant instead. Shortly after discovering that Kham is to be threatened by Admiral Dalla's fleet, the two return to warn them, but are received blankly. Dorsk 80 attempts to tear down his aberrant successor, telling him that nothing he ever does will be more important than what he could do, yet abandoned on Kham. Confident in himself as a Jedi Knight though, Dorsk 81 leaves again, planting a seed of inspiration in Dorsk 82. Soon, Admiral Dalla's Imperial fleet arrives at Kham and bombards the main city, destroying their cloning facilities, while making Dorsk 82 feel truly alive for the first time in his life. Elsewhere, Dorsk 81 gives his life to perform one of the most powerful Force feats ever depicted in Star Wars, using the Great Temple's power channeling abilities to use the power of all of the Jedi Knights to push the entire fleet of Star Destroyers out of the star system, the most powerful Force push ever recorded. Dorsk 81 then died in Kip Duran's arms, having protected the Jedi and his friends by doing something nobody had ever done before, an act of true uniqueness accomplished by one whose intent upon creation was to never do anything new. Dorsk 81 was remembered fondly, and he would eventually be succeeded by Dorsk 82. He joins the Academy and also quickly becomes friends with Kip, who takes the young clone under his wing and helps him overcome his fear and become a Jedi Knight just like Dorsk 81. Dorsk 82 ended up giving his life over a decade later, showing what I infer as sympathy towards those viewed as simply parts of a system in saving droids from the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. Dorsk 81 and 82 really fascinate me as a concept. Clones intended to function in one hyper-specific role in a homogeneous society, who are aberrant and overcome their desire for homogeneity to become Jedi. As mentioned earlier, I love how this reflects some of the core messages of Star Wars. Breaking away from home, finding your own path, and deciding for yourself what you believe in. Except this time, it's not just a system, it's genetic. The Dorsks are engineered for one specific task, and Dorsk 81 breaks from this, separating himself from everything he's ever known to take a step into the unknown. In the grand scheme of this universe, it is very minor, the story of the Dorsks, but really beautiful. I would have loved to have some sort of project featuring Dorsk 81 or even 82 as a main character in Star Wars Legends, but alas, it never came. Though the Kham clones are canon thanks to the beautiful novel Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher, which also expands upon Luke's canon New Jedi Order, so all hope is not lost. Lastly, I have one more thought. The fact that both Dorsk 81 and 82 are Force sensitive has always interested me. Dorsk 82 was created before Dorsk 81 knew that he was Force sensitive and wanted to become a Jedi. What does this mean for their line? To me, it hints at the idea that maybe all of the Dorsks, all 82 of them, have always been Force sensitive. And it was just first Dorsk 81 who realized it. And it was 81's actions that made Dorsk 82 realize this as well. What a powerful statement about generational trauma and inherited class and traits. All of the Dorsks could have been powerful Jedi Knights, but were held back by their society and their preordained role by descendants they never had known. But that's just a thought. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. My reading recommendation, because that's something I'm going to start doing, based on this episode, is Jedi Academy Leviathan, a comic series by Kevin J. Anderson and Dario Carrasco Jr.